Strong values and strong opinions. The Mike Broomhead Show. KTAR News, 92.3 FM, and the KTAR News app.
All right, the big news in Arizona as far as politics goes is Prop 400 going to the ballot in Maricopa County, transportation tax, the continuation of billions of dollars. And joining us now to talk about this is the Senate President Warren Petersen. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me on the show, Mike. Good
so let's talk about this deal, because this went down to the wire. This took a lot of negotiating. There was one version of this plan, I think, that passed that the governor wouldn't sign, and changes had to be made. Can you let us know, first of all, what's in this that's so important, and what changes were made that changed the governor's mind?
Well, if we didn't have her on board on the first one, and to get us all on the same page on the second one, I can tell you what had to happen for us. I think for her, probably the big win for her was that she got one question instead of two questions. But outside of that, I would say everything was a concession on our part, and I think MAG came our way, and you know, we appreciate that. I mean, this will, if passed by the voters, this will be the most conservative transportation plan in the history of Arizona. I'll just go over some of the concessions that were made here. First of all, no light rail expansion. They wanted 54% to go to roads. We got 63% to go to roads. There's not going to be a light rail going around the Capitol. We have prohibited that. There's more oversight at MAG. We now have 4 more appointments, legislative appointments, that are going to be at MAG. One thing we've learned through this process is that there is a lack of accountability at MAG. We've got no lane reductions. We put in there that they can't reduce the amount of lanes. We're starting to see this trend among cities where they're actually creating more congestion and reducing lanes, so we made sure that you can't do that. We have more transparency on the ballot. The way they had the ballot written, you couldn't tell what you were voting for. We're making sure people see exactly the percentages that they're voting for so they can make an informed decision. Cities that have underperforming bus routes, they're going to lose funding under this plan that we put together.
So can you describe that? What do you mean by underperforming?
So we have set metrics in there, and if they're not recovering a certain amount of funds for what they're spending, if they're not collecting as far as tickets, it's basically kind of like a free market. If you're not making money, you go out of business in the free market. Well, if these guys are not recovering or getting enough, then they actually lose. They're going to lose. They need to be efficient, or they're going to lose money. We made sure they cannot put a mandate on electric vehicles, so people have driver freedom. And we've said no shifting of funds. The prior plan that they had would allow them to play shell games and shift from roads over to transit. And so anyways, there's a lot more, but tons of concessions on their part. It was really pretty much the same bill that passed before, except we actually got a few more concessions, and then she got the one question instead of the two questions.
What are those two?
So so earlier it was, the first version was one question about transit,
Yep.
The second question about roads. This time it's all one question. Do you support this transportation package, or do you not support
That was the clarification I wanted people to hear. So now this goes to the voters in Maricopa County. Do you see this as something the Maricopa County voters will be in favor of continuing?
You know, that's going to be up to them. As I mentioned before, as far as these plans that have gone before them, this will be the most conservative plan that's ever been put before them. So I think that they will support it, but I'm not going to speak for the voters. That's going to be their decision.
Can you explain some of the pushback? Because I know even now, after the vote has been done, after it's been signed by the governor, that there's some pushback within, you know, whether it's the Freedom Caucus or the most conservative members in the Senate. We're not happy with this plan, even as conservative as you say it is. What did they want that they weren't getting?
The splitting the questions was probably the biggest thing.
And because they wanted to be able to, the transportation part of it, if people didn't want it, then they could get rid of it.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things. I think another thing, too, was, unfortunately, I don't think it did. You know, this has been out there for a couple of years, so we've been talking about this for a couple of years, and some of the changes came in late. And my caucus, we got the engrossed version, and we sat down for an hour and a half. We read every single line of the 24 pages. I don't know that the House had enough time. And so I know there were complaints by some of them that they didn't feel like they had enough time, although we did have the language out. The language was available prior to look at. But anyways, so I know the questioning was probably one of the biggest things.
Is this going to be good as it's written? Is this good? The Far East Valley and Queen Creek, they've had issues of getting in and out of town because the freeway system is not like it is in downtown Phoenix. You go in the West Valley, there's one way in and one way out of Buckeye. Something like this with the future of what's in this, is this going to help those places in their growth and getting traffic alleviated in those towns?
Yeah, I mean, this has a list of all of the projects, and this prioritizes projects and makes sure that we reduce congestion and have a good transportation system in the Phoenix metro area.
And what's it going to do for the roads? Is it going to help keep the roads safer? Is it just going to make repairs in the roads? What's it going to do for the roads in town?
Yeah, I mean, this is critical. Well, it all works together. There's local funds, there's county funds, there's state funds. And so this makes sure that cities can. Now, there's always an ebb and flow of budgets. Economies go up and down. But this will create stability to make it more likely that cities can have the best maintenance possible in their cities.
So why did it take till the very last day? Was it really that contentious of a negotiation?
It was really MAG, I think, holding out until the last minute. We like I said, it was really they made all of these concessions that I listed off and many more.
What was it? Because I know the city of Phoenix was pushing very hard for that light rail expansion to the Capitol. And I guess Mayor Gallego and others said that they would concede that would not be, they would agree to a plan that didn't have that included. What finally made them understand? Was it just that it was never going to get passed if it was in there, or what was it that changed their mind?
I really don't know what changed their mind. I know they came on at the end, and maybe it was that they felt like they ran out of time, or were concerned. I don't know. I can't speak for them. I know they came on. We said this is what we need to have it by. If it doesn't happen, it's not going, and so they came on. But you'd have to ask her. I'm not great at speaking for other people.
Warren Petersen is with us. He is the Senate President in the Arizona State Legislature. We have another segment with the Senate President. We're going to talk about the vetoes that happened, working together with the governor's office, what got passed that they were happy about, what didn't, that they were hopeful would. We'll get just a catch-up on the session coming up next. All right, we are joined in studio by Senate President Warren Petersen. Let's talk about some of the other things that happened. Record number of vetoes by this governor, and a lot of people would think that there's discussions that go on between legislators and the governor's office before a piece of legislation is passed, and once in a while it's going to happen where a governor would veto things. Do you have an opinion as to why the number of vetoes? Was there a disconnect with the governor's office? Was she trying to make a statement by vetoing so many different pieces of legislation? What do you think?
Well, as to the vetoes, I think there were quite a few where she actually made a mistake on. Especially there were some nonpartisan ones. I mean, we had both parties voting on those, and so on those, I think
the tamale bill.
Yeah, the tamale bill. I think that's a great example. So I think she made a mistake. It could have been for whatever reason. Maybe what. I don't know. I can't speak for her. So, yeah, there were definitely some mistakes. A lot of the vetoes, I think, were expected. I mean, look, the legislators are the ones who decide what they're going to run for legislation. The governor doesn't get to decide what people elect their legislators and ask them. And there's Democrat-introduced bills. There's Republican-introduced bills. And so, of course, obviously a lot of those more conservative bills, she is going to veto. But I do think there were quite a few surprises and maybe even regrets on her part that she vetoed some bills. Now, I will say on the other hand, too, I mean, we had a majority plan in January. We outside of election integrity, we almost completely accomplished our majority plan.
That was my next question. What are some of the key things that were passed that the governor signed that you think are keys to this session that are successes for you?
Well, I mean, just recently the rental tax. I mean, that is a huge that was a huge Republican priority to combat inflation. It's a $5 billion tax cut over the next 20 years. That is money that literally goes back into the pockets of citizens.
Of renters.
And renters, tenants. That is money that goes to tenants. And, people may scoff at the amount, but, $50 to $250 a month, that's a tank of gas. That's food on the table. So, I hear countless stories of people just scraping by. That's a little extra, and it makes a difference for them.
Yeah, one of the things we track is I keep in touch with like St. Mary's Food Bank and the number of emergency food boxes they're giving out. And they're still giving out almost a record number every week. And these are working families that are just not able to make ends meet until payday to feed their family. That kind of money, $50 a week or a month, $250 a month, that could be the difference maker in a lot of those families standing on their own 2 feet.
It's huge. I mean, and another thing, we passed the largest tax rebate in the history of Arizona. I mean, with the Democrat governor. I mean, that is truly incredible. So for us to provide inflation relief and then as part of the budget, the rebate that we did, the tax rebate that we did, those are two huge wins.
What are some things that you wish had gotten accomplished in this session that didn't? Are there some things you kind of left on or had to be left on the table that you wish had gotten done?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned election integrity. I mean, that's still huge on everybody's mind. I know people are sick of it. Some people are sick of hearing about it, but there were some come on, these were like common sense bills. Even the Secretary of State, who's a Democrat, I mean, he agreed. You had his support, you had Democrat support. For example, there was a bill that said, allow ballots to be posted so there's more transparency, and it was bipartisan, and so those things should have, I think, definitely been signed. And then, of course, we had our own priorities and our own election integrity that, a lot of really reasonable stuff. I know there's certain things she's not going to sign, but those, I think, perhaps after, the dust has settled, I think those are some things that may be able to get accomplished next session.
But what happened in 2020 in Arizona, then what happened in 2022 here in Maricopa County, isn't it still just too raw for people? If you're on the side that whispers election integrity means you're an election denier in the minds of some, even though I read the legislation, I agree with you. A lot of it was common sense stuff. But is it just at a time where that issue itself is so polarizing you can't get anything done?
Again, and I think so maybe on some of the really, if it's very, very only Republicans on it. But like I said, when we had bipartisan support, I think those are errors and those are mistakes, but it's my opinion. Yeah,
and the other part of it is that happened. So we've talked about what didn't get done, what did get done, but moving forward, do you have a good working relationship with the governor's office? Do you anticipate going into the next time around, it's going to be a good working rapport with that office?
To this point, we have had a good working relationship. We've had a lot of meetings. We met a lot on the budget. We met a lot on 400. Now, obviously, when it comes to ideology, we're diametrically opposed. But I think she respects, our, the power that we have to put things on the desk. We respect the power that she has to veto our legislation. And so, as we've kind of gone through this dance, we've been able to negotiate what I think the budget, very good. This transportation plan, very good. So the relationship has been good. I think we have a respectful relationship with each other as far as if she asks me to meet with her, I meet with her. If I ask her to meet with me, we meet and we can have this, civil discussions, although we completely disagree on just about everything. Yeah. We agreeably disagree. And so I think that's a healthy thing for the citizens of Arizona.
I don't want to let you go without talking about the girls in sports legal issue that's going on, the law about transgender girls playing in girls' sports and the lawsuit that's happening. Can you talk about what could happen in the legislature with that and the law as it stands? Do you think it's going to hold up?
So I think as long as we're in kind of local and district, the Ninth Circuit is, they're the most liberal district in the country. I feel like as long as it gets to the Supreme Court, which is our goal, we'll push it to the Supreme Court, then I think it's a slam dunk. But, it may be a bumpy ride up to there.
And explain the goal of this law. Can you explain what the mindset is behind why this law is in place?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Like 20 years ago, I don't think anybody could even believe that we're arguing about this. It's really simple. We want to make sure the men don't play in women's sports. The girls, the boys don't play in girls' sports. We want to make sure our daughters and our granddaughters can enjoy their athletic whether it's just fun or careers.
So you believe that this is going to end up in the Supreme Court, and you think it's going to be victorious when you get to the Supreme Court?
If it makes it to the Supreme Court, I think it's a slam dunk.
Yeah, and let's talk about the Dino appointment. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, if you this has been a very important and good committee. That one of the things that the Senate has the authority to do is we get to decide who gets confirmed. And
right.
We've made it very clear that we're just not going to rubber stamp. I had a very good meeting with the governor, and I think since we've had that meeting, we're seeing some very good quality appointments coming out of her office. I basically just said this. If you appoint somebody who's radical far left, or they're political, or they're an activist, and they don't know anything, and they're unqualified, they're going to be rejected. If they are questionable, if we've heard some things and we're not sure, but they're not political, and there's just kind of a lot of question marks, we have a year to decide. We're going to put those on hold. And then if they are qualified, not political, not radical, and competent, they will get appointed quickly and easily. And so we've had some of those appointments, and I think the most recent appointments she has been making have been falling into that category. And so those are going to happen. But there is a ton of appointments she made up front that are really struggling. A lot of those will be rejected, or they're just going to be monitored until we can make sure that these people are competent and not radical activists.
I always appreciate the time.